start and proceed. So welcome everyone. This is the Rubin Users Committee meeting. It's just an opportunity, basically, for members of the Users Committee to see each other in person, while most of our meetings are held virtually to optimize resources and everyone's time. And it's an opportunity for you, the users, to tell us what can be done better. How can we as a user committee can help you advocate for? So the session, we thought of having, first of all, an introduction, followed by some guest speakers that will tell us about other type of occasions in which users could play with the data and provide direct feedback on how they live that experience, and once again, what might be needed moving forward. And before I start, I want to say once again a huge thank you to Melissa, who helped us put together the slides, organize the session, and she's just incredibly useful to anything about the Users Committee. And there was even a slide with the agenda that I have just described. So introduction, updates, user-led discussion, and then a discussion led by Users Committee members. So what's the Users Committee? It's an organism that was put together to solicit feedback from the community. And once that feedback is gathered, and we as User Committee member have also tested some data preview capabilities, we will convey the feedback to the Rubin project. You can find in these slides a bunch of links that hopefully you will find useful, from the charge and the internal organization of the Users Committee and how that's been that is renewed on a two years basis.
Yes, your terms are 2 years.
With 2 years terms. We are providing people with, public reports on our finding, and then the responses by the Rubin Community Project. And we hold meetings twice a year. So the reports will be one per semester, basically. And you can contact the User Committee in multiple ways. There is a dedicated topic on community forum where you can find anything related to our activities. There is a mailing list that you can use. You can contact us on Slack and individually. So you can see here at the bottom the names of the current members. Hopefully you know maybe in person even some of them. Otherwise, hopefully will be easy enough to contact us via email, via community forum, Slack, or all the resources that are available to you. And here are a bunch of smiley faces that go along with the names. And I'm very happy to see a big fraction of the User Committee members here in the room today. And maybe some more are also connected on Zoom. Here I see only two people on Zoom. But I suppose there are more connected. So what are we looking forward to next? We will have a more formal UC meeting dedicated to drafting the next report on October 28th. It will be once again a virtual meeting. The community is welcome to join. There will be an open component to the session and then a closed door component as a second leg of the meeting. And we plan to deliver a report fairly quickly, typically within a couple of weeks from the meeting. And now I will hand the virtual microphone, I suppose, the 8 microphones that are here on the ceiling to Greg or Frossie.
So I think Frossie will speak to some slides that were made to give an update. This is a very regular part of the users committee meeting.
All right.
Updates.
Frossie, are you on the line?
Actually, that's me.
Oh, Gregory is
Okay.
here. Great.
So Gregory is here, and will join the audible part of the room in a second.
So I think in this room, we're speaking to ceiling mics, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so so on behalf of the whole RSP team, Frossie's our team lead. And on the product owner, we're describing where we are with the Science Platform now and a little bit about where we're going. So first of all, just in current operations, we're continuing to serve.
Stand there, and then your voice will go that way, and you'll be able to see the slides.
And this still.
And it'll still pick you up, and then they'll hear you also.
All right. Our DP 0.2 and DP 0.3 services are still working well. We have had more users sign up, ebbs and flows, and how many people are actually actively doing queries and operations. So one thing that we're very aware of is that we don't have a lot of visibility into the load on the services in real time, and have the kind of level of monitoring that we would need for the user load that we expect in the production era. So there's a major cycle of work in the Square group on monitoring tools that's going to start. We also become concerned about how much interaction is required with users for completing the account sign-up process. We've had a lot of cases of users needing to get human assistance. That's not going to scale to the operations era, so we're working with the CI logon team to address some problems that have come up a few times. One distinctive one is that there's an email confirmation step involved in signing up, and that step has been messed up by some recent generation security software that tries to test whether links are good, because CI logon sends people one-time links. And we've reached the limits of our self-hosted deployment of Discourse, the software that runs our community forum. So we're moving to a hosted plan to provide long-term robustness there and better failover behavior. We're looking at possibly renaming the support forum website to Rubin.community. In general, the data services and the front-facing side of the project is moving a little bit away from the lsst.org domain, so this is just consistent with that. All right, so on infrastructure, there's been a trend over the last couple of years that the RSP infrastructure, which initially was really only intended for the user-facing services, has become central to staff-facing services, especially on the summit. We now actually deploy the sort of top-level control processes called CSCs for the telescope and observatory control system in Phalanx, which is the deployment infrastructure for the RSP. Just another instance of it there at the summit. We've been training people in how to build services for within our RSP framework, within the Phalanx framework. That was very successful. A lot of people immediately went out and started coding up services after going to our bootcamp. We've had to make improvements in infrastructure to make this kind of redeployability of the infrastructure more readily usable. So we have better secrets management now. We're trying to reduce the workload for people trying to engage with the system. And we have it designed for exposing a single source of truth of documentation for all the RSP aspects and beyond. So this goes beyond just narrative documentation like the existing dp02.lsst.io website, but is like fine-grained documentations that when you're down in the portal, you click on a column in a table query, you get information on that column. So doing that requires APIs for delivering documentation, not just static web pages. So that's what we've started working on. And then on the data services, You've probably heard in other contexts about the client server butler. This is a vision of the core data access infrastructure in Python of the whole LSST science pipeline stack. The butler is a set of Python APIs for reading and writing data objects so that the code that accesses them is not exposed to details of where they're in storage, what kind of storage they're on, POSIX files, S3 objects, local, remote, all of that. So the butler itself has been very successful in its original goals, but it's been stretched by all the different ways that we use it. And so we now have evolved to an infrastructure where there's actually an API, a web API for the butler that allows us to separate the client side from the server side, that lets us do better with scaling and with authorization. This is an essential step towards the support of user-created data products in the operations era. That's the original butler infrastructure just really was not appropriate for handling I'm not quite sure how to say this without using this word, a sort of an untrusted community, right? In the original butler was an inwardly facing tool. It wasn't expected to be used to write data by many people who are not part of the project and are all just working on the project's own goals, and keep privacy of user data, right? People who are working on science projects need to be confident that other people can't see their data if they don't want them to, and all that. So this is all towards that end. Okay, so QServe, which is our distributed spatially sharded database. We are working on improvements to the way that the data services interact with QServe to make it easier to see the status of a query, to understand whether it's executing on fast or slow queues, to let users abort their queries, to let the system abort queries with an appropriate notification to the user that that's happened. So this is not going to change the query capabilities, but it's going to change the manageability of the services a great deal. And then I think this didn't make it onto this slide. We're also looking at adding to QServe the capability to upload tables so that people can do multi-object queries. This is a very important functionality for the operations era as well. In the notebook aspect, we call Nublato. We've now released the 4th significant version of Nublato. We have to keep up with the community's work on Jupyter Lab and Jupyter Hub that evolves rather quickly. They have a rather bad habit of making kind of not backwardly compatible changes to it. So there's always a little bit of a scramble when there's a new major release of Jupyter Lab. You have to kind of make sure everything's still working. Right now, when you go into our Nublato system, you get a choice of containers to launch to support your Python session, but those are all just flavors of one container. There's a history of different releases of one container. We want to extend that to support a variety of containers so we can have contributed pre-built containers so that they could come from science collaborations. They could come ultimately, possibly even from small groups of users. We don't, but we have to think about exactly how we will use this capability. But this is something that's been requested many times to have some pre-installed collaboration-specific software. It also makes Nublato much more usable kind of in the larger world around us. This is all open source software. We've put a tremendous amount of public money into building a really nice tool here, and there's interest in using it elsewhere. And so this is an important feature to help with that possibility. We had some concerns about some of the backward compatibility issues here. So, we're going to, in operations, have 2 data releases up at the same time, and the current alert production. So they're really like 3 software releases behind the data that you're seeing will be visible through the RSP at once by the time we get to DR3. And they all go through the same version of the RSP, but you have to be able to run different versions of the pipeline software within your notebook in order to be compatible with the data that you're reading, because we can't guarantee that the pipeline software doesn't have changes. It should have changes, right? We want it to evolve, to get better. And so we need to decouple the RSP infrastructure more from the science pipelines software that's run in it. So that's what that last point is about. Oops, I think we need to refresh the slide deck here.
Okay, let's do it.
It's like, I think, yeah. I kind of see it there already. It looks like it's underneath.
If it becomes necessary, I'm also on it. I can screen share.
We're good. Okay, good. On the portal aspect, we've refreshed the user interface significantly. You'll see some bigger screenshots on the next page. It's much more aligned with the Rubin styling now. It has a dark mode available. There's direct access to common searches. Sometimes these things were a little obscure about how to get from the front page to the kind of search you wanted to do, like to get to DP 0.3 required some opaque actions originally. And we've decoupled the Rubin HIPS images from searches of external image catalogs. And we've improved some things in the tap search. A lot of it is kind of lower level infrastructure that's not visible, but one of the benefits is you now get some pre-populated menus for places where previously we were just asking you to type a string. When a tap result is truncated by the kind of maximum number of records limit that is inherent to the service, we now really clearly display that that's happened. You get a little yellow warning triangle that says your results have been truncated. You can resubmit your query. And there are many detailed improvements. There's a link to the release notes. So this is an example of what the DP 0.3 search looks like now in dark mode. So you go straight to this thing. It tells you that it's the DP 0.3 search page. So that's the idea here. Okay, so now planning for DP1 and the first look data, which until recently was being called first light data. So the emphasis here is on the data. These are the first images from the Simone telescope, both from commissioning camera and from LSST cam, respectively for the two. We're not focusing on a lot of these features in the science platform. So scaling is really essential here. This is the first time that all data rights holders get automatic access. We expect there to be a tremendous level of interest with the real image data for the first time and the publicity around the first light event. So we're focusing on hardening the services rather than releasing a lot of new features at this time. Still have till DP2 and the start of operations to add additional features. And then just since this is the user committee, we'll also comment a little bit on management. So the Square team is finally at full strength again. We hired some excellent people. We're formalizing a collaboration with CADC that will help us deliver more new features in the TAP service. We're using their TAP service code, which is open source, as the base for ours, but we'd like to kind of facilitate faster upstreaming and kind of back and forth collaborative improvement to the service. We're working with a Japanese team towards building a full focal plane visualization capability for the operations era. We're working very actively with the IVOA. We're contributing, two of us are on the team for developing a new generation of IVOA service standards to be more compatible with contemporary web infrastructure. Working with EPO. We're going to be working with the alert broker teams a little bit more closely after the discussions that we had at this meeting, and particularly about how broker installations will have access keys to let them get to the data in the RSP more easily. And then finally, as I kind of alluded to before, there's significant interest in the RSP from other projects and other missions. So for the moment, these are kind of exploratory in nature. There are people who've actually done prototypes from several other missions and archives at NASA using the RSP. That's pretty exciting. None of it's public yet, but we are encouraging them to kind of help us figure out like how to develop this further as a useful infrastructure. So that's the story. Frossie's online, so you can ask questions for both of us.
I was just curious what it means you're reaching the limits of the community forum. Does that mean the number of users?
It's kind of the manageability of it on our in-house deployment. We've had some, Frossie could speak to that better, but we had some issues keeping it up and running. Like we would much rather have a hosted deployment where people know they're discourse specialists and they're maintaining it and they maintain redundant copies and so on, so that we don't have to deal with all those kinds of issues. That the scale where we're going to have factors of several tens at least increase in the number of active users, if not more, if not hundreds, in the operations era. So it's just much better to put that out on a hosted service where people have expertise in that scale. Frossie, do you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So one of it is just that the community forum was like one of the first services we deployed like 8 years ago or something. So it was running on this like virtual machine at DigitalOcean, and it was doing fine for the scale that it is, but it was not aligned with the rest of our technical base. The other thing is that the community science team has an interest in a lot of integrations that are available for Discourse, which is the software that backs the forum, like AI plugins and that kind of thing. And so, we are putting them on a plan that actually is hosted by Discourse itself and actively maintains and adds integrations. And so that's just a way of exposing more functionality to the community users going forward, without taking effort from the development team, which is between the RSP and the internal project services is fairly to capacity in terms of workload.
We have a question from Dominique on Zoom.
Yes. Gregory, can you say a little bit more about the collaboration with CADC? If I have well understood, CADC is a candidate to distribute the Rubin data to the general, in a general way when after the two-year period. So what's inside this collaboration?
So I'm only talking about a technical collaboration with the CADC for development of data services. So in particular for the TAP service and the SIA V2 service and VO space. Those are the focus of the collaboration. It's what the CADC may be planning to do for serving data after the data rights period expires is orthogonal to that. I mean, it's very plausible that the collaboration is worthwhile to them for developing more knowledge of our systems, towards doing that. But that's not what it's about. I mean, Frossie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah. So as Gregory said, we do use the CDC software base for the TAP service, and there are developments on the QServe side that make us wish for features that are not already there. And so we're hoping that we can work with the CDC team to add them. These features might actually be useful for other exotic databases as well in the future. So I think this is good for the community as a whole. CDC also has a fairly mature infrastructure for dealing with user catalogs, and we're very interested in not reinventing wheels, as that is a feature that is on our to-do list. And so we just want to make sure that we're not leeches and we're not just asking for things and not giving anything in return. So that's what it's about.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Gregory or Frossie? If not, well, let's thank Gregory for. So for the next part, I think we can take just a little break from presentation and have a discussion interval, and then start with slides again. And for this phase, may I ask one of the members of the users committee to please take notes for what comes up so that we can have that ready for the next meeting.
I can definitely take notes on your behalf.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose you can also have the AI feature on Zoom that can do that for us. Anyway, I trust you more.
Yes.
So some discussion topics now. A brief introduction to that is as part of our previous meetings of the users committee, we were a bit concerned about not really reaching the community that we would like to gather feedback from. So we tried to do that in various ways, from advertising the committee at conferences, workshops, so on and so forth. But we also individually reached out to about 350 people. And that was probably the most effective way, I think, to solicit feedback. And we created, once again, with Lisa's help, a nice form that I've posted on Slack on the channel of this session. And that's a way for people to tell us what they think, tell us what their issues are. And it's a way for us to keep all of that in a table. And that can remain also for the future, and to better identify which issues are the most pressing and the most common. So here I've put on this slide just a bunch of bullet points from the feedback that we have received. This has not yet been discussed by the users committee, so it's very unfiltered. So just throwing it out there. I will read all the points together, and maybe we can then comment each one separately. We go from storing large data sets, such as AGL line curves, as part of, I think, the Agile project developed by INAF in Italy within the DP0 and the RSP. Some people brought up the need for maybe simple queries on the portal, but it sounds like work is in progress for making all of this more user-friendly. Documentation remains a big issue. People want everything in one place, done easily, and one person focused more than for the RSP aspect, the LSST pipelines. They are concerned about how to find that documentation. And then there were questions about how can the in-kind software be tested and then can be integrated within the data previews, or especially during commissioning. Probably the biggest question is scalability. What are the limitations? My understanding also from what we heard the other day during the SAC meeting is that these are very known problems. These are not even problems, they're known numbers. Maybe even just having them lighten up more clearly in the documentation can truly help the users. But maybe a deeper level, a deeper question is, can the users really do their science at scale using the science platform when the data flow in? One thing is you have hundreds of users testing a small amount of data on, and the notebooks. Another thing will be when thousands of users will be querying millions or tens of millions of objects at once. Will the RSP be able to handle that, or do people really have to start thinking how to get their own computing facilities, computing resources to achieve this goal? More tutorials are always welcome. They are so wonderful. We, as part of the user committee, have tested them. I think no one will object my saying they are of really high quality, really helpful, and people are hungry for more. And yeah, I'm just wondering if maybe you can also make a call for more DP0 users who are playing with different science cases that maybe want to contribute to those, and then have them vetted by RSP team. And then only for the users committee, actually, there was a request recently that maybe some of you have seen in our mailing list about providing input for the RSP future functionality FAQ. And that will be maybe something we can discuss at a later stage. Frossie, I see you have your hand up. You want to kick off the discussion?
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of just clarify on one of the points that you raised. So this is, I realize this is very unsatisfactory, but the idea that we actually the resource limits for users of the RSP are known, it's a little bit misleading. So what we have is we have a sizing model that basically says if 10,000 users show up and they need to do these things, and we can, like, what kind of resources can we provide for these users? And so you can take the entire capacity of the sized capacity of the cluster that the RSP runs on and divide it by 10,000. And you can indeed come to a fixed number, a known number. You can come to, like, 4 cores and 16 gigabytes of RAM. But the whole point of the RSP architecture is that it's elastic. And so if there are not 10,000 users, there will be more resources, there will be more space, there will be more CPU, there will be more capacity in bulk computing. And so I realize this is very frustrating because people want to know, like, I'm buying a laptop, how much RAM and CPU and disk space does it have? But that's not actually how it works. So the numbers that we have quoted are basically the kind of most pessimistic numbers about the capability of the RSP. The second thing to do is, aside from the fact that the user numbers are unknown, the active user numbers are unknown. We know how many data rights holders we have. We don't know how many active users we will have. And we have no ability to, like, model how one number turns into the other number. The other part of the thing is important is that the actual user patterns are fairly unknown. So we've gone through the data preview, but the data preview, the interaction that the data preview population has had with the data is not necessarily typical. And moreover, through the experience tells us from other jobs and archives, experience tell us that the user interaction with services does change during the lifetime of the survey. For example, when a mission first starts, there's a lot of interest in the image data and reprocessing, because the community needs to build trust in the quality of the processed data. So they're trying to understand how the data was processed, they want to eyeball the images and so on. And a year or 2 years in, as people the community understands what's being done and trusts that it has been done well, people tend to do more catalog type work, analysis type work, and for starting with data products that the facility has provided. And so the relative popularity of the services has an uncertainty factor and is likely to change. So again, because of the way that the RSP has been architected, we could actually provide more resources for popular high demand services and less resources for less demanding services. So it's not even per user, it's not even per service, it's a combination of all the above. And I realize this doesn't lead to certainty and people would like to have some, but I just wanted to explain that we have to be very conservative in what we tell you the capacity is, but I would be very surprised if it isn't effectively less constraining than it may seem from the numbers given. Okay, hope that helps.
Thank you, Frossie.
If I may, I would just like to add to the first point that it's not from the point of view of data and science collaboration, it's not just about storing light curves in data preview 0. Because at the moment the situation is that we have nothing in data preview 0 for AGN, and in Roma, in INA, we are trying to fix this problem of the missing simulations, so that we have actually some simulated catalog level data to put in somewhere, but we really need help in terms of at least storage preferentially also in terms of computational resources in any ways to make this data available to everybody. And this is a big issue for us at the moment, that we don't really need, we don't really know what we're gonna do in terms of storage or availability, even if we have the simulations done. So it's not just a minor point that we would like to store a product, it's that we're missing everything at the moment.
Before moving forward, are there comments or responses regarding this point? In particular, this AGN dataset or potentially other datasets that could and should be integrated perhaps in the DP0? Vincenzo?
It's partially related, but I think that this problem of the dataset integrated in DP0 is maybe a bigger problem because it is related to the in-kind contributions and how these in-kind are going to be delivered to the community. So maybe it is also connected to the fourth point in the list. So all the software that are other groups are preparing as in-kinds might be useful for users to be tested on the RSP. And so there is a general concern about how all these contributions are going to be delivered and used by other people in the community.
Does anyone from the RSP team or the project have any comment to those? We can go through the full process. We make this concern part of our user committee report and wait for a response that way. Just wonder if before we do that, there is maybe some quick answer to put people's mind at ease before a few months pass.
So I have a specific comment and a general comment. Sorry, did I just talk over somebody? I can't see the room. Okay. So I think the general comment is DP1 is breathing down our necks. So I'm not responsible for the data availability in the RSP, but I would be very surprised if there is much capacity for more data preview zero work at this point. DP1, the technical teams have to be ready for data preview 1 around February probably. It is a full scale event. All 10,000. It's no longer a preview. It's only a preview in is previewing Rubin, but it's not a preview for the RSP because every data rights holder will have at that point the ability to sign on and use services. And also the data product teams will be very busy with looking at the first data coming off the telescope with ComCam and seeing what it is that we built and what does the toy look like. And so I don't want to mislead anybody, and I can't tell you definitively, but I would be very surprised if data preview zero work was coming down the pipe. I will make a just general comment, I think, for user committee feedback, curated feedback as it is. I think right now this is great. We're still at the level where people can just put ideas and can go, oh, that's interesting. Yes, we can, or we'll think about it. As the full scale event happens, I think we will be very interested in feedback of the form of popularity and an impact. So, is a feature that is a small improvement to an operation to a service that 80% of people use, more important or less important than a very valuable feature to a very small fraction of users. And so this is the kind of thing that we ourselves from within the project cannot determine. I mean, I can determine some things from experience and just observing what people do. But what I can't do is when somebody asks for something, I can't tell whether another 900 people could really benefit from it or not. Just kind of a suggestion that as you're collecting feedback going forward, so we try to get a little bit of an estimate, or like this is going to be like super popular, or it's super critical to a small community and it's going to make a massive difference to their ability to get their science out, because choices will have to be made in terms of prioritizing future work.
Gregory, I saw you moved. Is that because you had?
I think Frossie said everything I would have said there. I mean, I think there's really, unfortunately, there's no scope for adding data sets at this point between now and DP1. That's the data preview 0 was intended to allow users to interact with the science platform. It wasn't specifically intended to cover all science cases. It would have been nice if that original simulation data set had covered more of them. It didn't, but we are, very focused on developing scaling tools for operations and the remaining features. There's just no room to add anything to the schedule at this point. So I'm happy to say it even more strongly than Frossie did.
Elisa?
Yeah, so we have one example. So Rubin doesn't plan to do more simulation, serve anything else for data preview 0. But for example, users came to us and they were requesting more truth information. There was some that was available, but they wanted more. So with Desk, Jim Chiang just uploaded a bunch of parquet tables that had a bunch of extra truth data. They're shared data directories in the RSP right now, where it's very easy to just make it, you drop your stuff there, everyone can see it. That's like a current capability. And so it was extra truth tables for all of DP0 shared very simply. So that's an option for any science collaboration that wants to make something and share it. So we should see if that works for you first. And then, so go ahead and try things, do things, try to break things, try to exceed your limits. And then when we see you do that, then we.
Can you give me an estimate on on the scale that's possible to do it this way? Like, are we talking about terabyte scale?
I can't, I would have to go and look and see what Jim uploaded.
Okay.
But yes, I think, Gregory, can you quote like per user?
I cannot,
Yeah,
no,
maybe.
not off the cuff.
Maybe this can be discussed offline, or maybe on the conversation can be continued on Slack.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, well, it was sort of a question related to this topic that I'm wondering if this is, these sort of community contributed ancillary data sets or data products and things like that, if there's a role that the IDACs can play, and if there are plans in place, I guess, to make it easy for, if I'm on the USDF or the US, the US data facility, and I want to grab some data set, external data set from one of the IDACs, have we set up like a common API or something like that to enable more interactivity like that? Because I think that would leverage the resources a lot better.
This is an excellent topic, and I think it was inevitable that as we approached the beginning of the survey, and we are now beginning to see what's possible and what's, what we can do, what we can think of doing, we're inevitably going to be in this position where we want more resources for pretty much everything. And as Frossie and Gregory said, right now the project is absolutely focused on delivering what we said we would deliver, which is these data previews coming up and then the data releases. And we've scoped a certain amount of user resources to enable the first science with those data products. At the same time, the world's changing. There's all sorts of new ideas. AI is really going to be an amazing advance in all of our science, but it's also going to take a lot more resources. Right now, we have a limited amount of resources to support users beyond this initial, beyond what the project is doing. The IDACs are certainly one place where we can imagine as a collaboration working together to most effectively use those, what resources we have available. And where we're at with the IDACs right now is individual groups have set up a scope of things that they can provide. They're also limited in various ways, and they also have different types of resources that they will contribute. Last year, we did quite a bit of work trying to understand individual use cases. And that's going to continue going forward. And I think I would encourage all of us to work together to hone those use cases and try and use the resources that are available out there in the most effective way together. There is no grand yet, interconnected USDF and IDAC model. But we are learning more and more about what the IDACs will do and what is possible to do at those resource locations. There's a great session tomorrow where we're going to talk more about what the IDACs are doing. And I think there's still a chance for us to continue to develop these use cases and think about how we can use them most appropriately. But it's going to, at least until we really understand the usage patterns, as Frossie was talking about, it's going to be a while till we understand, how to most effectively use all the different resources that are out there. And we're going to be limited. The project itself, the observatory, once we're in operations, and this is getting to be very critical right now, we'll set up a resource allocation committee that will certainly manage the user resources at the observatory at the US data facility. And some of the IDACs may also be brought into this allocation process as well. And that's going to be a merit-based process from all the good ideas that we have to decide how to allocate the limited resources we have. Other IDACs we're going to work with to do, we have a sense the community has a large project or something that makes most sense attached to those resources. We'll do that as well. But there's still collaborative efforts. You can still get involved and have your voice heard about how these things will be used. And then finally, I just want to make a comment about the in-kind software testing. We always envisioned that the in-kind teams, especially those working with the science collaborations directly to improve the science capabilities in their analysis tools, would have access to the data previews in the RSP. So we imagine those developers and those science teams getting in there and working on those as they go forward. It's just a matter of, if there's something that's not available, we need to hear about it. And then, as Frossie and Gregory said, we'll work on how that might be supported going forward. But those teams should already have access to the RSP that was built into the contributed software effort, at least in the science analysis sphere. The other things that the software effort are going directly into the project, and they're already working with providers.
Thank you, Bob. And I suppose it's important to know how eventually the resources will be allocated that you have, but also maybe a pathway for people to provide their own resources. For example, get additional cloud storage or cloud resources that can be integrated maybe somehow in the current system instead of every time having to reinvent the wheel and basically have the same systems installed in hundreds of servers, because that's just dumb, especially if it's the same cloud service. So maybe if this is already there, that's great. I'm just not aware personally, but that could be maybe one model worth advertising for people to propose. And I think people will need to know whether to ask for, $3,000 for a new laptop to access the science portal, or also $100,000 of cloud resources to integrate or use separately to be able to use all this great work that's been done.
But maybe Frossie wants to add to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So great point. So this is very much in our minds, and it was one of the drivers for the services architecture that was, for going on cloud in the first place. Even though we have a hybrid model, there are some the technical challenges are surmountable to what I call bring your grant to the data model. We are going to, once we get past EP1, we're going to provide basically a document that basically says what kind of resources would we be able to support from people who want to bring their own resources. It's a lower priority work because by policy and principle we are trying to do as much as work as possible for the people who don't have additional resources and really need the RSP and don't have alternatives. But this is definitely a model that we're aware of, and depending on whether it's like storage space or compute or other things like that, the answer is different, but something is probably doable. The kind of more interesting challenge for us, and this is why it's not why isn't already done, Frossie, is that just we cannot be a Google reseller by law. So we can't take your money and then add it to the pod and then give you services in return. So the reason it needs some work is because we have to figure out how to set it up in a way where you pay the bill for your resources, but then those resources are exposed to the RSP. So that is why it's not trivial, but it's definitely doable, and it's on our roadmap to make that easier as we go forward. This is also particularly interesting for situations where there are cloud resources that have capabilities that we don't currently expose in the RSP. Like everybody asks always about GPU clusters, and we need a little research sprint to figure out how things like that would work. But we're very, very motivated to make that possible over the duration of operations at some point.
Thanks, Frossie. I'll only add one more thing, is this resource allocation committee I was talking about. We have an internal milestone to produce an initial model for how that will work. You could imagine what lines we're thinking on right now will be much like a telescope allocation committee, right? We will receive proposals. They will be judged by a panel of your peers and ranked, and then the available resources will be assigned based on that process. And so later this year, we should have an initial document or process that we can share with people.
Thank you. May I ask if there are any more comments on this or any of the other points? And if there are new topics that people in the room or on Zoom want to raise that we may then discuss in future user committee meetings. Yes, Renee.
Sure, yeah. I just wanted to touch base on the last thing that was raised, which is the discussion of this resource allocation committee. I just wanted to understand the connection of the resource allocation committee and the IDACs, because a lot of folks I think have either an area of expertise that they would use down cycles for to do some piece of analysis. I know that we have a lot of IDACs who are interested in contributing to desk for small pieces of analysis. And I wonder if the resource allocation committee is quite top heavy and whether that will actually just introduce a lot of extra work and delay. But if there was some other reason why it's going that route, I wanted to understand that a bit more.
Thanks, Renee. I think we have been a little confused on this topic, or we've been the source of confusing people on this topic. I think the way we will end up is that where we have identified working with science collaborations, specific activities that can be done at an IDAC in close collaboration with a specific science goal for a science collaboration, we're just going to let that go and enable it and not force everything through this resource allocation committee. The resource allocation committee was originally, and has been in the plan for a long, long time, was to allocate the user resources above and beyond the individual user resources from the observatory itself. And once we brought in the IDACs, we believe it is probably true that some of the IDACs will provide compute resources that are more generic, that people could imagine proposing for a certain amount of CPU time, for example. And those we think it would be useful to put through the IDACs. But we don't want to get in the way of strong collaborations between IDACs and science collaborations.
Thanks so much for clarifying. That's great.
I just sort of following on that. I mean, the thing is that the rack with allocations in general, Tony Tyson pointed out to me years ago that it's not kind of like we have a time allocation committee. It's like the unit's nights and maybe it's 1 or maybe it's 4. With computers, it's 1 or 1,000. Like people's needs are kind of evenly distributed in log space, not linear space. And so it'd be interesting I'd like to talk to you more about what the rack looks like, because some things are just, you know, you want to do it on a short time scale and lightweight, and some things are, no, we need to 6 months of thing, and then it means that's appropriate to have like a time allocation committee type thing, whereas once every 6 months for a substantial amount of resources.
I think that's a good point, and we need to expose those kind of aspects as we go forward. So, I mean, the main point of the rack is to provide a level playing field for good ideas that can use whatever resources we have available in a resource constrained environment, right? Just like telescope time. If we had infinite number of telescopes, we wouldn't need tax either, right?
Yeah, well, I guess my point is needs are linear distributed for telescope time and distributed in logs, evenly in log space for compute needs.
Michael, can you please come closer because the microphones are only on this side of the room.
Stand up and go over there.
I've been walking
The
back.
microphones are only active on this side.
Yeah.
of the room. I can hear 'em.
You want me to stay nearby or can I go sit down?
You can sit down. I will hold my own hands. Thank you. Oh, resource allocation. So telescopes, at least they used to, come with telescope operators and an infrastructure running those telescopes. So when I get, 10 nights of time, I'm not just getting a finite spreadsheet resource. I'm getting person resource either explicitly because there's an operator or implicitly to do that. So when we talk about a resource allocation committee in the context of compute, does that need a service? Does that need attention from a very limited pool in operations? So my question is, when we talk about this allocation, is there a pool of people who are helping that? Or are we just talking about you get some GPU hours and you get some storage?
So you did want me to say.
I guess I did.
That is a good question. I will only say that, again, for the resource allocation committee, we originally were thinking about the 10% of user resources that would be available from the observatory. That, of course, will be supported by the observatory. And we do envision a class of super users, expert users that we would support. Perhaps they could come in, they might come in to work right at the US data facility as opposed to the data access center on the cloud, for example, and then they would be supported. For the IDACs, we have worked with those teams to ensure that they do have a level of support to support users when they come to those individual IDACs. So yes, there is a support model in quotes envisioned, but exactly what it looks like will vary between different IDACs and the scale of what's happening there.
One of the motivations for the question was, what if someone said, hey, I want to do this thing, I'm asking for these resources, and the result I want to provide as a service to the community, but I need a little help making that work. And just in the same spirit of asking right now, leading to DP1, there was the answer of no, the team is committed, we can't add more things. I was wondering how that looks in a couple of years. Will we just run into the same thing? Or is there going to be some available resource to help? Because it's gonna be a limited team, right? Like it has to be someone inside.
That's right. I think the other part of a resource allocation committee is analogous to a telescope allocation committee. It's incumbent on the observatory to put out a call for proposals that clearly describes what are the resources being provided and what that would look like. For the observatory, it certainly would include that kind of support that would take advantage of this part. I mean, that was always part of our model when we're supporting users. This additional compute resource that we're going to make available. So I think there will be a support model to enable people to effectively use the resource that we provide.
Sorry, there's a hand behind you.
Is it Frossie?
Yeah, so just to expand a little bit, so I think it was Michael, right?
Yeah.
So
we have
it,
the video thing that doesn't have
yeah,
the
so it depends. So there are some paths to contributions that we can anticipate and we can be ready to support. For example, you know, I have a highly curated catalog of, you know, potentially Earth-destroying asteroids. Can I make it available, right? And so those are things that, like, you know, we have seen coming, and, you know, we are hoping to provide well-rehearsed recipes that people can use to contribute that way. Perhaps certain kind of computational payloads is also something that we're working on now. If Link or somebody had said, you know, hey, we're curating this very high value machine learning container, can you make it available in the notebook ASP in the RSP? You know, we are working towards being able to get to a yes. There are some things we will not have anticipated, and when they are proposed, we would have to go and think about it. And there are also some things that, to go to Michael's point, you know, are technically feasible, but the question is, what is a support model for them, right? Because ultimately, this is the problem. Services are scalable, user support is not. And so, for example, if a collaboration or an initiative like LinCC said, you know, we'd like to make a machine learning container available to the RSP, I would be like, fantastic, this is how you build a container, this is how you provision it, this is how you ship it to me, and then the users can have it. And where is your forum for help desk supports relating to this container? So I think the thing to think about is, when you think about, can I contribute something to the RSP, you're essentially saying, can I contribute something to 10,000 users? So if I was in the proposal committee, one evaluation committee, one of my questions was, and how does this get supported for 10,000 users? Does the person have the capability, or the organization have the capability to do that? So I think ultimately that is going to be the major friction towards doing things like this. It's not going to be so much the technical effort, you know, once we get past, you know, commissioning and DR1, we are resourced to continue to, you know, making technical contributions and extensions to the RSP for the lifetime of the survey. The issue is going to be the support model for those contributed services, data sets, whatever they are.
Thank you, Frossie. Is there any other urgent comment on the matter? If not, we can maybe move forward to to the next topics, in particular to the talks by the people who we have invited. But I strongly encourage everyone who has additional thoughts, questions, or ideas to propose to do so on Slack, and we will note them down and keep on discussing them at the next UC meetings. In particular, we will hear today from Carlin about Rubin Science Assemblies. We'll hear from Greg Madejski about the Science Assembly, the Data Academy, and then we will hear from Keith about info sharing during commissioning. And this is to you now, Jeff. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Carlin, member of the community science team. I was just this will be very brief, but just to remind those who don't know, that we hold weekly events that are called Rubin Science Assemblies, or in the past you may have heard them called DP0 Delegate Assemblies, same thing, new name. These are weekly events that we hold on Thursdays from 9 to 10 in the morning Pacific time. And this shows you a snippet of the recent schedule where where you can see that we alternate between tutorials, where we go through a tutorial demo notebook on one week and drop in sort of co-working time in the alternate weeks. And so that really is meant to be, like, there will be Rubin staff, there will be community science team members in those off weeks. So if a user anywhere is having an issue, has questions, wants to work through and some analysis they're trying to do, we're there available to help. And then I also wanted to note that each of the tutorial demo sessions is recorded, and we post the links. So these are actually links on the website if you go there. So you can go and watch all of them. And I would also note that this particular snippet that I picked out here from the schedule shows 3 community science team members, and Valerio is actually a community member who contributed a tutorial, a demonstration. You've seen this slide. I just wanted to note that in response to a request from the users committee, we have been showing this and speaking to this at each of the science assemblies recently. I don't know if that means you've gotten a flood of feedback or not, but we're at least putting it out there. So just wanted to note that. So these assemblies recently, we actually try and keep a tally of how many people have attended. This, if you can see this table, this is sort of our unofficial tally. And I will note that the reason there were 41 at that is not because everybody was so excited to hear me speak. That was because we had taken a few months break, and this was the first one when we restarted. So that was enthusiasm, not for me, but for DP0. But you can see we typically get around 15 to 20 people at these lately. I think part of that is, I think we used to get more, a year ago when DP0 was kind of new and fresh. Now we're getting around 15 to 20, and the drop-in sessions, maybe around 10 or so people. One thing I wanted to note is that, one thing we sort of hoped when we started this whole process was that like-minded users would sort of self-organize into, communities and work together and develop science explorations on their own. And I think we haven't been maybe as successful at that as we would like. And so I do think this is one place maybe where suggestions for how to foster that interaction better, or even involve, like direct involvement from the users committee would be really great. Like, y'all are welcome to come and show up and help us sort of, nucleate some interest groups to work together. So that was one thing for discussion, I guess I wanted to mention. That's one thing that we've struggled with a bit, but generally I would say we get excellent feedback. People seem to enjoy the assemblies, and from what I hear, get quite a bit out of them. And I'll stop there, hand over to Greg.
Unless there are questions from the.
Are there any question for Jeff before we move on?
The question in the Zoom, will we have a new assembly schedule following the RCW?
Yes, we will have a new schedule very soon. We're taking the month of August off, summer vacation, and then September we will resume.
Thank you. We have one quick question. Can you also please walk this side?
I used to come to the DP, these things have been like so amazing for my research team, but I was gonna say, I wonder if that kind of natural collaboration is happening and we just haven't told you. Like, one of my main collaborators is Punya, who I met at the DP0, and I think I just didn't tell you. So maybe it's happening.
Good to know. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's thanks Jeff.
Right, thank you very much. I will give you a quick overview of the Rubin Data Academy. It took place just recently in June. It was conducted in 2 sessions to make sure that we actually had a reach to Europeans and US teams. That was morning California time, and then also in the late evenings for the Asian team. And we actually had quite a good turnout on both sides. Typical attendance was about 80 during the morning sessions and about 30 in the evenings. Even though we had approximately 180 people who were registered. So I suspect that maybe there are some people who simply wanted to register to know what it's all about, and then maybe they're listening to the recordings on their own. We advertised it fairly extensively, and I think that paid off. We had this a number of people who did participate, and the ideas were to both show the functionality, both of the portal aspect of the Rubin Science platform, but also to work through some of the tutorial notebooks. Everything was prepared ahead of time, and our presenters were actually able to go through step by step in live, demonstrating that to the attendees, and then attendees would follow and continue possibly asking questions whether something didn't work, and so on and so forth. Those are typically 2 to 3 hour long sessions. So you can think of those Rubin Data Academy sessions to be a bit like very condensed assemblies. This particular one lasted for 4 days. And we tried to cover both the DP 0.2, the cosmology, as well as DP 0.3, the solar system science simulations. And we had plenty of time that was set aside for the breakouts. This is the organizing committee, and there were also some delegates who have presented, and we're extremely grateful to all of those who actually did present. In some cases, they had to prepare somewhat special tutorial notebooks in addition to the standard ones that were prepared by the community science team. And I have to say here that even though I was one of the key organizers of the one for 2024, I really was standing on shoulders of giants. Melissa and Jeff prepared the virtual summer school in 2023, which made it much easier for us. And of course, we had plenty of really nice comments from the community. So I was specifically asked to give a bit of a summary of what was the results of the exit survey that we provided at the end. We felt that the responses from the community who participated in the Data Academy were generally very positive. I think that there are some, I selected few that were maybe a bit more critical, which is exactly what we wanted. You know, anybody can tell me that it was great, and that's fine, but what I want to know is what can be done to improve it. And the common comment was that we were not maybe sufficiently proactive in telling people exactly what's going to be introductory and what's going to be more advanced. That's an easy thing to fix. We also had a bit of a common feedback that some tutorials were maybe too fast in some cases, where maybe we're just too introductory. Again, that those two go hand in hand together. I think that something that maybe we could have done better is the breakout sessions, which is basically similar to what Jeff was just talking about in terms of those collaborative sessions during the assemblies. I decided that I really want to put one comment that was very positive. Somebody said that it's been my experience that those live demos can often fail. And apparently we were very lucky that things did not go south in our cases. So that was very nice. Perhaps one thing that is really important to discuss in this context is whether we should have those academies more frequently. There was one suggestion, and I think that really resonated well with us for further discussion, whether we should have those more frequently, every 6 months or so. In particular, the timing now is really very delicate in terms of the fact that DP1 is coming up very soon. So I think that this is something that we have not resolved yet. This is definitely going to be a subject of discussion of the community science team. So maybe I should stop at this point. This gives you basically the two key metrics from the response. You know, in many cases, people really felt like they do need to work a bit more on their own. As I should say that all the Rubin Data Academy presentations were recorded. So if any of you would like to listen to them, they're available.
Great, thanks. Any question for Greg? If not, let's say thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
And now the last person we invited to say a few words is Keith, before the final discussion, before we go for lunch.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about information sharing during commissioning. And this is a complex and large topic. So I just have this one summary slide, and I want to spend most of the time for Q&A and discussion about what are the topics that you most want to hear about within this. So this is just a very short summary. So there are two documents that you can reference to learn about the plans, the policies, the guidelines, the boundary conditions. One of these is, so if you want the policies and guidelines, this is information sharing during commissioning, Sitcom TN 076. This lays out the boundary conditions, the data security standards, the maximizing the impact of our media and outreach events around First Light, and goes through all of the sort of policies that are in response to those boundary conditions, and then the guidelines for how we can continue to communicate and learn from each other most effectively. Because of those policies and guidelines, we needed to think about how we would implement those for our set of communication channels that we use across the project and that are shared with the community. And so that's discussed in this DMTN 286. That basically goes through each of the communication channels and discusses what, if any, changes will happen once we're in the on-sky commissioning period with ComCam and LSSTCam. The shortest summary is that pixel images of the sky should not be shared outside the project team during the commissioning embargo period.
Which is 30 days.
In anything until the project explicitly gives permission. Because of the
Outside.
So everything leading up to system first light, in order to maximize the impact of that day, the whole communications and education and public outreach is planning a whole momentum building exercise to try to maximize the impact of that event. And so any information that's going out is going through Rubin communications and education outreach channels. Right. So basically no pixel level images of the sky until at least you can think about this embargo period is extending at least through system first light media celebration.
And the project team includes commissioning in kind.
So project team here is defined as anyone who has access to proprietary data products. So that's Rubin Observatory staff, approved in-kind collaborators to the system integration and commissioning effort, and any kind of affiliates, reviewers, anyone who would have access to proprietary information must abide by these policies.
So I can happily post PNGs and other non-pixel data.
No. I'll get to that. I'll get to that next.
Isn't that pixel data?
So a pixel image. So this would be any of the proprietary data products themselves cannot be shared. And then anything that is like a PNG, any kind of graphic that is representing pixel images of the night sky. Okay, so for example, a color magnitude diagram is not a pixel image. Okay. But anything that is representing, camera pixels on the sky, right, cannot be shown outside the project. Yep.
And commissioning embargo period, like we commonly comment on that as 30 days, but here it means up
So
to
there's
first
one standard that is set by the data security
Yeah.
standards for Rubin Observatory, but then in order for the communications media goals around system first light, basically that embargo period you can think about the 30 days as a minimum.
Yes.
That is a minimum, but in practice, we will extend that embargo period at least through system first light media day.
Celebrations. And then after that, if you're working on commissioning data, then does the 30 days kick in, or is it like still?
I think the 30 days has to hold.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I think that depends on exactly how our strategy develops around communications and outreach needs.
I'll just add in discussions with the agencies, we envision moving into the more operations like regular period of 80 hours sometime in SV.
Okay.
So formally before the survey starts.
So the 30 days doesn't necessarily, Well-
It'll stop at some point, and then we'll move away from the real commissioning into SV, which will look more like regular operations at some point. And then, of course, we're starting to build up things that come out about that time.
I see a question from Igor and then Mario.
So say if you do some targets of opportunity observations during commissioning, this is possible for it to happen. Say if you do some preliminary source extraction, even without the, spiffy image difference analysis and so on, will you be able to just disseminate those products and maybe the postage stamps?
Yeah, so for the purpose of alert production, or alerts that are released are not subject to this constraint. But that would come, after we've started the public alert stream. We have also said that if there were some kind of extraordinary event, if there was some kind of data product that we felt was so important to get to the community on a faster time scale, that there could be special consideration of how to handle that. Yes.
One minor question. So what is the time difference between first light and publicly showing the world that we have data? I find it like, if there's first light and half of us here in this room will not see anything real because we are not part of the commissioning team. I mean, we are all so excited, right? If you guys see like the first images, I want to see them, right?
It's
Without
even
doing
worse
this.
than you think, because the actual images that will go into the public showing of First Light will be very tightly held within even the team. And so, I may not even see all the stuff. So we're talking about weeks or a month, I think, between when the team is ready and has produced the data set that will be shown publicly. So First Light with a technical First Light will be sometime in early 2025. And by the spring of 2025, April or so, we hope to have the First Light event. So it won't be long.
Okay. So moving on, because of this constraint and the fact that within the project team, we need to, we have this globally distributed team that needs to do this incredibly complex task on a very short time scale. We need some kind of forum where we can communicate and be fully enabled to discuss whatever we need to do in terms of the data processing and image processing to characterize that data. And so we are in the process of setting up a project team Slack workspace that we can use for that work that is specifically around the images. The membership of that will be exclusively project staff. That includes and the approved in-kind contributors. And there will be several channels that will move from the current LSSTC Slack workspace to that project team Slack workspace. Aside from that change, our goal is to maintain as open approach as possible with our other shared communication channels with the community. So for example, Confluence will remain in the present state of access. Jira will remain in the present state of access. LSST.io, where all the tech notes and technical documentation, that will remain open. GitHub. Most of these communication channels will remain open. We will not be able to post any pixel images in those spaces. Okay, but there may be, our goal is that the tech notes will continue to reflect our increasing technical knowledge of the system as we go through commissioning. What this means is that the community and project team members will have access to a lot of information in principle. So for example, the DM Jira tickets, you know where to look, you can find them. You can find development branches on GitHub. I mean, like if you knew where to look, it is not our intent to hide that information, okay? We don't want to, and it would be extremely onerous for us to do this as a project. And so that information will be available, and what we are asking is that there's a sort of trust and that the project and the community will understand that this is work in progress by your professional colleagues and collaborators. The other part of this is that we will be trying to communicate the status of the commissioning effort regularly. As I mentioned, the tech notes are one of our venues for providing that detailed technical information as we're learning about it. But we also hope to use, the existing digests, news stories. We've talked about using the community forum, using various channels to provide regular updates on what's happening. Pause there. Questions?
As always, you feel free to add questions on Slack as well. Let's thank Keith again. Minutes, I would like to talk specifically to the other members of the users committee. Do you have any feedback, comment, or question to bring up before we wrap up? And the technicalities about, say, the more in-depth homework that we've done to assess. I will create, you can comment on that, or I can create a document where we can just aggregate all the feedback. Alejandra.
A comment, could you move to the other slide where there are the notebooks from our homework? I continue saying that these homeworks are a great way for us to prioritize, otherwise we would be just like under time to see this. I checked the image cutout tool, and I think it was very instructive also how the example of a particular science case was very like precise information or whether the reasons you want to use this. And also I think this was great in line with the session that we have on Tuesday about the image cutouts. So it's great to start in this, and from the session also I noticed that there are many things that are still in the process of change. So also seconding feedback that we received from the users about this needs to continue being clarifications for us to prepare, and also echoing what Frossie mentioned about how at first we want to understand very well the data. So in that sense, I missed like very basic things, like for instance, how much kilobytes I have in a typical cutout, let's say 10 seconds, or what would be like the planes or the data units that come in the header of the image. I think that those things are very useful, especially if you want to combine with other surveys. So about that, about the image cutout tool, and also I have like very detailed things that I can comment on the Slack. But also I wanted to comment very briefly on another tutorial that I checked that is below, that it says tutorial translated into Spanish. I learned that that was used that was done by the Argentinian in-kind group. So a big shout out to them for providing that. And also related to that, that reminds me of something that I heard in a conference we had in Chile last month, the LSST LATAM conference. And I heard something from the Education and Public Outreach team regarding how they wanted to translate things from English to Spanish. And also they mentioned the arrow backwards, translating from Spanish to English. Let's say a school teacher has a nice idea and want to provide something. I think that is a great idea. And the time in Chile with telescopes in Chile, I think is the first time I heard that. And I think that's also very, that still holds, even for instance, for the undergrad level in Chile, many people don't know yet very well English, and sometimes even in the grad school. So that arrow backwards, I found it very great. And I don't know if, for instance, in the assemblies or in the Data Academy, that has been encouraged, not only for Spanish, other languages to English. And if it has been done, because I haven't attended the events, it has been done, a big thank you. And if not, I think it shouldn't encourage it. And also for the people that can understand both languages, would be happy to help, for instance, translate from Spanish to English and help the community. I can imagine an undergrad student having a great idea with DP0 or the future previews, and helping to that. Also for exposure for them, exposing to the community, let's say the GitHub rep and things like that. That's why Karen.
so many good ideas all at once. Yeah, thank you, Alejandro. If you could write some of it down and actually send it to me in an email, especially the stuff about the image cutouts. And I will say we do have a budget line item for some translations in the future as well. It just so happened the Argentinian team stepped in and did it in kind for this one, but we should have more translations. Thank you.
Any other pressing issue or comment that the users committee members want to make? Any hand up on Zoom that we don't see here?
No hand on Zoom. No questions in the
Okay,
Slack.
then we can close the session here. Let's thank all the contributors again.
I'd like to finish by saying thank you very much to the users committee. We really, this is your telescope facility and survey, and on behalf of the community, it's great to have you helping us connect with them. So thank you very much. And one last thing, good news. The M2 assembly with the mirror was put on the telescope today. So-